Good evening, everybody. Good evening, good evening. Welcome to Books and Books here in beautiful downtown Coral Gables, Florida. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. While you are silencing your cell phones, if I could just take a moment of your time to show you our Books and Books newsletter. This will give you a synopsis of all the great events we have at Books and Books just about every night of the week. Some, of course, worth mentioning upcoming. We've got Steve Rakeland and his new cookbook, Man-Made Meals, will be here on Thursday night. We've got David Sedaris will be joining us. His new book, Let's Explore Diabetes with Owls. Lisa C. and her new novel, China Dolls. Joanna Rakoff, My Salinger Year. Any number of wonderful events, as I say. You can pick up a copy of this tonight at the counter where the books are being sold, or you can go to our webpage at booksandbooks.com and give us your email address so you don't miss anything. And you will see by the lights and cameras here in the store, we are live streaming the event tonight. So, of course, for the benefit of the cameras pointing at the audience, you please make sure you're sitting next to who you're supposed to be sitting next to. And while we love to have you here in the store, of course, you don't have to be. If you prefer to watch online, you can always call the number on your screen and ask a question of the author during the event, or even order a book for yourself. We'll get it signed for you, and we'll ship it to you free of charge anywhere here in the U.S. In 2008, Nathan Deuel, a former editor at Rolling Stone and The Village Voice, and his wife, a National Public Radio foreign correspondent, moved to the deeply Islamic kingdom of Saudi Arabia to see for themselves what was happening in the Middle East. There they had a daughter, and later, while his wife filed reports from Baghdad and Syria, car bombs erupted, and one night a firefight raged outside the family's apartment in Beirut. Their marriage strained, and they struggled with the decision to stay or go home. At once a meditation on fatherhood, an unusual memoir of a war correspondent's spouse, and a first-hand account from the front lines of the most historic events of recent days, the Arab Spring, the end of the Iraq War, and the unrest in Syria, Friday Was the Bomb is a searing collection of timely and absorbing essays. Nathan Deuel has contributed essays, fiction, and criticism to the New York Times, Financial Times, GQ, The New Republic, Literary Times Supplement, The Atlantic, and many others. He holds an MFA from the University of Tampa, a BA in Literature from Brown University. He also attended Deep Springs College. He lives in Los Angeles. We're very happy to have with us Nathan Deuel.
Wow, it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for coming. This is a really great turnout. Book tour is a weird thing. You travel around, and in some cities, it's sort of, you don't really know anyone. You don't know who's going to come. In other places, it's like a family reunion. I look in the audience today, and some of my favorite people on earth are here, including my mother in the blue. Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy journey. And before I read, I'm going to read a short piece and then a longer piece. Won't keep you too long, I promise. But I feel like it's worth kind of telling my story a little. So I grew up in Miami from 86 to 97. I went to Dash. There's some Dash people in the crowd. And I was the, it's a special school. I gave the keynote speech at the graduation a few days ago. Was that yesterday? I guess that was, amazingly, that was yesterday. Yeah, it was a time to reflect on the kind of like pretentious, ridiculous human being I was when I was 17. I thought I knew everything, and one of my best friends in the whole world, David Knight, there in the back, he and I together thought we knew everything. And I was all set to go to the Cooper Union, and I was kind of ready to be this sort of artist type person. But then I got a phone call from Deep Springs College, this really unusual school in California. It's 26 students. It's all male. It's been around for like 100 years. In the mornings, you go to these rigorous classes, and in the afternoons, you work on this ranch. Slaughtering cows, milking cows, swathing hay. And I quickly discovered, both in the classroom and outside of it, that I knew almost nothing at all about anything. I was wildly incompetent at nearly everything I tried, except writing. And I found, sort of a great deal of meaning and fluency and power in just writing. Who knew, So then I went on to Brown, and it was a special place in some ways, but in other ways, after going to an unusual school like Deep Springs, it was difficult to be surrounded by kind of the privilege and nonchalance of the people on College Hill in Providence. And so I dropped out, and I to my parents' chagrin and surprise, I'm sure, got an internship at a newspaper in Cambodia, where I sort of discovered a new version of what you could do with words. This was a country that had lost its entire generation of intellectuals who were brutally killed by the Khmer Rouge. And so we were there. I mean, I was there because I was an intern, but there were mid-career journalists who had left their big jobs for a year or two to help retrain a generation of journalists in Cambodia. So I recall standing next to this little Cambodian reporter who'd been doing it for 10 years, and I'm like, you should just interview the prime minister. And he's like, no, I'm scared. The only reason I feel safe is because I'm here with you. And I'm 6 foot and bumbling idiot, but I was the white guy. And so living abroad was like really special. It really kind of changed my idea of what writing could do. And I also met a great woman there who's become my wife now. And she and I traveled through Southeast Asia, kind of following terrorism and trying to figure out how our lives had changed after 9/11, if that's true at all. I'm still not sure. Eventually, I made it to New York and got a job as a reporter, and kind of fell in love with journalism. And the Village Voice in 2004 to 2006, when I was there, was a really special place. There were like 26 senior editors on the masthead, and I just found a place I could really believe in. We were doing great work. I could write a story, I could edit a story, I could be nurtured by this sort of fabulous group of people who believed in writing. But then we got bought by the New Times, and I don't know if there are any New Times employees in the room, but they have a business model, and it did not involve 26 senior editors and 200-page Village Voice issues. And so they fired a lot of us, and I got a call from a woman I like to call a honey-voiced headhunter. She's like, calling for Jan Wenner at Rolling Stone. He'd like to talk to you. So I, hang up on her, thinking, no way, I'm not leaving. And eventually I took her call, and I went, and I took the job. And if someone had told, Dave or I, when we were 14, that I would be an editor at Rolling Stone, part of me would have thought that was like the greatest thing of all time. Part of me would have thought I was a complete sellout. And, after about a year there, I think I sided on the sellout end of things. I mean, there's a certain kind of person that can be very happy selling advertisements and Christina Aguilera cover stories and doing the occasional meaningful political story that Rolling Stone still does, but I couldn't do it. And so one night I packed a bag, and one night I thought about it. I'm like, I need to leave. I'm going to take a long walk. And my wife was ecstatic because of the kind of person I'd become, sort of upset and angry and frustrated. She's like, where are you going to go? And I was like, New Orleans. And I'd never been to New Orleans before. And I say to her, yeah, I'm going to go in and I'm going to quit and I'm going to walk to New Orleans. And so I did. And it took about 5 months and 3 pairs of shoes and 4 quarts of sunscreen. And I met a lot of people along the way, and I was asking questions of them and myself, like, why are we here? Well, what are we doing? What do we care about? And when I arrived in New Orleans, I had this feeling that here was a place that I could live and be happy. And my wife joined us, and there's music there and culture, of a kind of culture that, I don't know if you guys know P. Scott Cunningham here in the audience. He helps run Oh Miami. Oh my, dude, don't be bashful. It's this really special thing you do. And New Orleans felt like it was ripe for the same sort of initiative. But after a couple months there, Kelly's like, you've had your turn. We did New York. I've allowed you to walk to New Orleans. It's my turn. How about we move to Saudi Arabia? So the first piece I want to read is, we've been in Saudi Arabia about a year, and it was a really dramatic time to be there. It's always a dramatic time there, but prior to us living there, to visit, you either had to be a pilgrim or a guest worker. And for Western expats, that usually meant working in the oil industry or defense of some sort. But we were there on these special visas. It was just a brief opening when the ambassador in D.C. was kind of sneakily giving visas to journalists like ourselves to go there. And every time we walked out the door, I think I said this on the radio today, we would just encounter these sort of mind-blowing situations. This guy who would literally say, my beliefs dictate that maybe I should kill you right now, but I don't want to because we're having this great conversation. I mean, it was a wild experience, and one made much more meaningful somehow when Kelly got pregnant, and it was clear we were going to have a child born on Saudi soil, which sort of really raised the stakes for us, because not only were we sort of these visitors, these observers, we became people who were trying to make a life there, and a life that was durable and safe for a little person. So one of the things you need to do to live somewhere is you need somewhere to sleep. So this is a story about one night with one of our landlords. It's called The Chest of the Horse. I'll live. Okay. For several months before we left Saudi Arabia, I dodged phone calls from our new landlord, avoiding an invitation to his farm in the remote north of Riyadh. Why was I afraid? In part, I couldn't get excited about taking our newborn deep into the desert. But at a certain point, to decline Muhammad's invitation would be too much disrespect. It was a mild day, perfect for a little trip. Kelly and I loaded up our rented Toyota. We carried blankets and plush toys and water and food. And with our daughter asleep in the car seat, we drove north. The miles clicked by, and I scanned the road for the sign in Arabic that said Exit 4. It wasn't clear how far we'd need to go, and with the brown earth stretching endlessly, the gas meter sinking, and the sound of our tires slapping against the pavement, I fought off a mounting feeling of dread by telling Kelly what I knew of our host. I come to know him gradually, first as we negotiated the rental price for the 1980s unit in central Riyadh, which was dark but roomy and situated in a deeply conservative neighborhood where everyone hid from each other. Then he and I spent an afternoon together on an appliance purchasing trip, arguing over to whether buy a gas or electric stove. In a gesture that made me swell with pride, an actual Saudi was inviting me to hang out with him. He later asked me to his family's istriha, a sort of meeting house. Excuse me. When we got there, however, the place was cold and empty. He showed me vast rooms that on other occasions might have been filled with family and festivity. Tonight, it was just us. He took 2 plastic chairs outside. We sat by a dark pool, and I shivered in the cold wind. "You know any good jokes?" he said. He told me how his old Romanian friend knew lots of good, dirty jokes, wink, wink, and that he could reliably get bottles of booze that he pilfered from the embassy. We sipped warm Pepsi. Muhammad lit a new Marlboro Light off his expiring Marlboro Light. Walking me to my car, he told me that he had been born in 1963, one of 12 sons of an upper-class family. He'd attended junior high in Los Angeles while his father was studying in America. After graduating from a Saudi high school, Muhammad began working for SABIC, the sprawling Saudi petroleum and plastics company. He started in the warehouse, rose steadily through the ranks, and eventually was sent by the company to study at Boston University. Upon his return, he did well enough that he could retire in his 40s and move his wife and children from their dark apartment, where we now lived, into a Riyadh mini-mansion. At the same time, he patted the top of my car, telling me that he also had a farm in the desert. "You should visit. It will be nice," he said. Exit 4 looped up and over a bridge. I could see nothing except the undulating hills of sand. Kelly asked if we were close. I pulled over, and in the distance we could see the faint outline of a Toyota pickup, a jihadi mobile, as some people called them. It sped toward us, kicking up an afterburn of fine sand. "Is it you?" Then my phone rang, and I picked it up. "Is it you?" he said. "Follow me." Soon the asphalt broke apart, and it was just dirt. Our tiny sedan bounced over rocks and slammed into ruts. Loretta stirred, yawning. When we had first met to negotiate the rent for the apartment, Muhammad had whipped out a giant cell phone to show me grainy photos of this new dream house in the desert. Just as he'd finished erecting the place, he said, a flash flood had struck. I saw in several snapshots that a great river of mud had knocked over palms, threaded fissures into retaining walls, and filled his pool with a brown slurry. "You'll see when you visit," he said. "You'll love my castle." We rounded the bend, and it came into focus. A 3-story sand-colored house with a moat, scalloped walls, and acres of desert. I lost my place. We barked on an insanely steep driveway that had probably made more sense on paper. I slowly picked up Loretta, who was still asleep in her car seat, and I laid her beside a plastic table on a concrete patio. I put another blanket over her, and Muhammad encouraged us to get comfortable. He took long drags on a 5-foot shisha. He also drank a homemade concoction of dark purple hooch and motioned to a stack of cups, inviting us to join him. From his laconic movements, I could tell it wasn't his first glass. There wasn't another human being for miles. We admired the view, and Muhammad began explaining how there had been a battle centuries ago right on the spot where we were sitting. Just after the Prophet's time, he said. The people had been outnumbered, but the tribe's fiercest warrior did not hesitate. He rode his beast directly into the enemy. Spears pierced his steed, Muhammad said, but the leader pushed on. I call my land the... He paused, frustrated. You know, it's the horse, the breast of the horse. The chest of the horse, I said. Yes, that is the one. I winced, thinking of a struggling animal riddled by sharp points. Then Muhammad brightened, pulled out his wallet, and laid a well-worn ID card on the table. Kelly picked it up. "Nice mustache," she said. It was Muhammad's Boston University ID, dated 1984 to 1985. His kids sometimes wanted to play with it, but wary of the card fraying, he wouldn't let them anymore. "I hate this fucking country," he said, sitting back in his chair. Lately, he confided, it was his kids that were causing him the most angst. He was happily married, but his wife's brothers were more conservative than Muhammad. "They take my kids and they enroll them in summer school," he said. "When they come back, they talk like little bin Ladens. It's bullshit." Loretta began to cry. Kelly needed to breastfeed and asked if there was a room inside. "Yes, of course," Muhammad said, leading us through the kitchen where the box for a fridge was still in the corner. Space for a stove was empty and raw. In a front room were windows covered with blackout tape. Kelly sat on a red carpet. "You'll be okay," I said. "Sure," she said slowly. "Why don't you go outside?" I couldn't make out the expression on her face. I climbed into Muhammad's truck, and we drove at an astonishing speed, bouncing over gullies and racing around corners. I was surprised to see that he was actually farming the land. There were rows of palms that stood beside a 30-foot plot of peppers, spring onions, and eggplants. "Your wife and kids ever come here?" I said. He shook his head. He was concentrating on driving through what looked to me like a moonscape of rock and fossilized sea creatures. "When did Columbus discover America?" he said, growing serious as he punched the gas, waiting for my answer. "In 1492, I said reflexively, nearly in sing-song, wondering how far we were going. "This place is much older than that," he said. He tapped the steering wheel, and we jerked to a stop. And what I saw in the middle of this blank desert were the remains of an ancient village. Sand and mud walls stretched some 20 feet high. It was exhilarating to find the remains of a 3-story guard tower. I fingered the rough walls. The constant assault of time and wind had revealed the stones that made the wall strong. It was rare to find anything so old in Saudi Arabia these days. Anything that did not glorify Islam or signal the country's emergence as a modern state was often destroyed. Muhammad offered to take photos, but the offer felt obligatory. He was looking at his watch. He was ready to go. I imagined how easily he or one of his brother-in-laws could demolish all this. Back at the house, we found Kelly sitting alone, Loretta inside, asleep. She gave me a look, and I told Muhammad, "We probably need to leave pretty soon." "Stay as long as you want," he said. "I'm not going to kidnap you." He went for another cup of homemade hooch. "Take some," he said, filling a tall cup all the way to the brim. "No thanks," Kelly said. Muhammad sat back in his chair. The fire had gone out, and he jumped up to get it going. Once the fire roared, he took some pieces of marinated chicken from a foil packet. He was a nice guy. The meat sizzled on a wire rack, and Muhammad plucked out a piece of burning coal with a pair of tweezers. "Next time," he said, "you must bring your friends." He tossed the coal back into the fire. The sun was going down, and it was cold. We ate some of his food. "I want to show you something," he said to me. And I followed him inside, happy to be up and moving about. We snaked through empty rooms. A bare bulb lit a hallway that led to a set of stairs. I saw Muhammad take quick steps, and I followed. Down a dark hallway, there was a room brightened only by the light of the moon. In the corner was a tall closet, and I watched as he reached up, searching for something. When he turned around, he was holding a small gray pistol. My heart raced as he began to pace the room, turning his arms sort of one way and then the other. Downstairs, he had seemed so slow-moving or sad. But now his body had this quickness to it that broadcast strength and resolve. Then he stopped, holding the gun, and I didn't like the tightness of his grip or the finger's position on the trigger. "You can put it back," I said. "I've seen it. I don't need you to show me anything more." "Don't worry," he said, leveling the pistol at the window, the metal shining in the moonlight. "It's not loaded. I just want to show it to you." I braced myself, waiting for the blast, the shattering of glass, my wife's scream, our daughter's cry. Muhammad turned and smiled. Suddenly he started stealing back downstairs, the white fabric of his long, flowing robe swishing as he raced toward my wife. "She hates guns," I said, dashing after him. "Please don't do this." I heard him say, if in a trance, "This is my Spanish pistol." "How nice," Kelly said, holding Loretta. She smiled through clenched teeth. Out of breath, I gave her a wild look, deciding that the best thing I could do in this moment was to take my landlord's arm and to just steer him away. "It's not loaded," he said to me, quietly, as we walked together into the desert night. Then he pulled the trigger over and over and over, and the dry click was echoing over the sand and under the moon. "Nothing will happen tonight," he said. "Thank you." So you don't need to clap, it's okay. So things like this would happen to us. But what we had was that we were together. And so it was, I was never afraid. I felt filled with purpose. Combination of writing things and raising this daughter. And then my dad got sick, and he died. And at the same time, Kelly got a call from NPR, because she had been freelance at the time when we were in Saudi. But they called her up with an offer for her dream job. The problem is that the dream job was in Baghdad. And Baghdad at the time in 2010 was not the kind of place you would necessarily voluntarily want to take a 1-year-old daughter, unless you're more nuts than we were, which is saying a lot. And so we cooked up a plan. Kelly would move to Baghdad, where she'd live in a fortified compound surrounded by machine gun nests, traveling at all times in an armored truck with a follow car. And I would move to Istanbul, one of our greatest cities, and I would try and make a life. During the 60 days she was obliged to be in Iraq, taking care of and raising a 1-year-old, which is something I had no idea how to do. And not many people do, but often you're doing it with a spouse. So I have amazing respect for single parents. And we struggled. It was very hard. I was sort of facilitating this digital motherhood, 5 Skype sessions sometimes a day, where she got to see her daughter's first steps. And after those 60-day rotations, she'd come home, and she was filled with pride in her new work. I mean, she was really finding her voice and becoming what I think some people call like one of the great correspondents of the Middle East in those years. But she would come back, exhausted and just somewhat traumatized, and I would have to kind of get to know her again, and her daughter would have to do the same, and it was awkward and difficult. And after a year and a half, we jumped at the chance as the revolution started to spread. The Middle East changed more in the last few years than it had in 50 years, with Tunisia and Tahrir Square in Egypt, Change Square in Yemen, of course Libya, but little things in Bahrain, and of course the men who would take their shirts off and march in the streets of Homs in Aleppo in Syria. And so Kelly managed to convince NPR to open a bureau, its first ever bureau in Beirut. And so in November 2011, we moved to the beautiful, historic, and tragic city of Beirut, where there had been a 15-year civil war that ended in 1990, where things had gotten better. And the idea was that we would live in this sort of seaside enclave, and she would cover Syria and travel a little bit, but we'd be together for the first time. And of course, as most of you know, what began as peaceful demonstrations were brutally cracked down in Syria, and what began as like incidences of mothers finding their sons' bodies tortured and killed on their front steps, to like literally hundreds of rivers of blood every day. And so this was what Kelly was covering, and she just got less and less sleep, and she started joining other correspondents in putting on battle gear and hiking overland into Syria to embed with the rebels and to try and understand their side of the story, because it had turned into a civil war by then. And what happened is that some of Kelly's colleagues started getting killed. And so we were faced with this sort of monstrous decision to stay or go. And the decision to stay was one that was tested every day. For instance, in this story, which I wrote for GQ, I was upset because the HBO show Homeland was attempting to portray my city and doing it rather poorly, I thought. Because Beirut, it looks a lot like Miami Beach, frankly. It's really, really kind of great. It's beautiful. And they showed like this potholed one-lane street with like people in robes and camels. It's like, give me a break. So I got an assignment to show the real Beirut, and it ended up looking a little bit more like a TV show than I had bargained for. Homeland in my homeland. I got to do this. Thanks for your patience, guys. This is fun. Can everyone hear me? I'm projecting. I'm not boring you to tears, I hope. Okay. Because I called Beirut home, and because an American TV show called Homeland won a bunch of awards depicting my home, and because this depiction focused on Hamra Street, which I crossed a dozen times a day en route to my butcher, baker, gym, my child's school, and the cafe where I write every day, and because this depiction was ham-handed enough to have enraged the Minister of Tourism, who was spending millions attempting to lure tourists back to a beautiful and tragic city. And on top of all that, because the show was originally an Israeli TV pilot, an agonizing fact for a country still technically at war with that Israel, and as if that weren't bad enough, because the purported Beirut scenery was shot on location in the Israeli towns of Tel Aviv and Haifa, I decided one Friday to describe a typical day on Hamra Street, which turned out to be much more like an episode of Homeland than I ever could have imagined. I normally walk my 3-year-old to school, but this Friday she wakes with a fever for the 3rd day in a row, so instead I take her to the doctor. I call Hussein, our driver, and he arrives in a lightly armored Mercedes. Loretta's pissed she's not going to class, so she is squirming and she is kicking my seat. I beg her to sit still and look out the window. We pass the Saudi embassy where 200 people stand baking in the sun, waiting for their visas, which they need in order to complete Hajj, the annual pilgrimage that all Muslims are compelled to complete at least once. To prevent corruption, the Saudis annually give each country a number of Hajj visas, proportional to each nation's Muslim population. So pretty much anyone standing in line on this sizzling October and Friday has won a spot in a lottery. Spots are offered randomly and with shockingly little corruption, so the people are a motley and diverse mix. Not my neighborhood's typical crowd of college kids, sad old men, and rich businessmen with their trophy wives. There's hardcore Bedouin dudes in dirty robes and checkered headdresses alongside wide packs of women wearing abayas. The line pulses against metal barriers, and soldiers with guns stand beside an armored personnel carrier, nearby a series of these sort of giant asterisk-shaped iron ties installed into the road to prevent anyone from parking close enough to detonate a booby-trapped car. We arrive at the hospital, which is affiliated with Johns Hopkins. The doctor frowns, telling me Loretta's been sick so long, we need blood work and a urine culture. At the lab, I hold my daughter in my arms, and she shudders. "Daddy, it hurts," she says, and I apply pressure. Back at home, the babysitter arrives. Loretta is napping, and I throw on a light cotton shirt for the walk downtown, where I'll meet a friend for lunch. The path takes me the entire length of Hamra. I pass the shuttered Applebee's, which will reopen elsewhere, my liquor store, which lately stocks Maker's Mark, which pleases me, the post office, where I'm sad not to discover the book that I need to review, but happy enough to find the last 2 issues of The New Yorker, and the local headquarters of the brutal Syrian Socialist National Party, which is aligned with the Syrian regime. In the alley, I spot a guy with a series of snakes and barbed wire tattooed to his arms and neck. He's making coffee on a machine that is bolted into the back of a busted-up minivan on blocks. He glares at me, and I see in his eyes a guy who would happily beat me to death. Posters of what I assume are martyrs have been pasted to surrounding walls, and the swastika-looking flag of that Syrian party is sagging from poles bolted to the walls of surrounding buildings. Downtown, which had been rubble until a few years ago when it was recast as a luxury mall, I joined my friend Mike, and he and I share Lebanese salads and a tureen of hummus. Mike's wife will give birth to their son at the end of the month, and they've tried to meet every member of the hospital staff, imploring them not to give her any drugs during delivery. Reviewing the plan, Mike's wife asked him, "Are you sure you can watch me writhe in pain?" Mike admits to me that he's not sure. I tell him about our own experience, how our daughter had been born in Riyadh, and that we'd fought hard to have a natural birth. We talk about all the people we know who have died last winter and this spring, Marie and Anthony, and a French photographer named Remy, such a nice guy, and our mutual friend John. I tell Mike I think about never coming back, like leaving this summer, staying in America forever, and I take a bite of hummus and I bemoan how dark and unnatural it is to live voluntarily beside the miasma of death and destruction that is Syria. And I realize that for those who watch Homeland, Beirut must seem as dark as it does to Mike and I in that moment, equally as unnatural. And some of that it's true, rooted in reality, in the persistent echo of years-old news stories. In a taxi on the way back to Hamra, I passed the site of a massive car bomb that killed the Prime Minister in 2005. Hey, good to see you. The driver takes a shortcut, and I see the Hilton Hotel Tower, owned by Kuwaiti royalty, ruined in skirmishes during Lebanon's 15-year civil war, trees growing from suites on the upper floors. But on first glance, the view along most of the streets around here kind of looks like Queens, New York. Likewise, on first glance, you might conclude that Homeland is a reasonably nuanced portrait of the war on terror, whatever that is. It's a portrait, anyway. The second season brought the action to Beirut, where CIA agents were made to grapple with a neighborhood that was hilariously, to people who live there, crawling with snipers and warlords. The scene that allegedly depicted Hamra Street, where you'll find 2 busy lanes of traffic at all times cutting through a series of thriving restaurants and nightclubs. There's a Crown Plaza and a new H&M. But they showed a narrow alley lined with sandbags and desert people, everyone looking like they're about to be shot. Now, on those same blocks in real life, on the day I want to show you all how nice my Beirut is, I stop at Cafe Eunice in the center of Hamra, where most afternoons I crack open my laptop for a few hours and I nurse a French press. The syrupy voice of this beautiful Lebanese singer Fayrouz bleeds from the speakers, and every table is packed with students and reporters and these amateur philosophers and activists and grizzled NGO workers with 1,000-yard stares. Next door is an art gallery. Hanging from a pole in front is an arty jumble of rebar. Bits of concrete sticking to the metal, and the whole thing is lit up by fairy lights. A fan above spins lazily. At 3 p.m., the power goes out, and no one notices. You can literally set your watch by the power outages in Beirut. Now, it's easy to assume that Homeland didn't bother to send any scouts to Beirut. Tickets are expensive. And it's just as easy to poke fun at their solution, send a bunch of actors to Israel. But don't we accept this as fiction? Haven't we always? You make choices, you build a space, and you choose your details. And whatever you build, whether it's on the page or on the screen, it's never complete. That's not Beirut, you say. But what makes Homeland's portrayal downright silly is the incongruity between the Beirut in the show and the Beirut in my mind, the place I'm raising our daughter and trying to feel good about it. As if on cue, reality and fiction converge. The power flickers on and my Twitter feed loads. A car bomb has just exploded across town. My phone won't dial out. I spill hot coffee on my foot. I feel punched in the face. The explosion is not far from where I had lunch, and I flash to Mike, his wife, their unborn child. I watch a girl sip a strawberry smoothie, a boy bites into a sandwich, and an old man struggles to plug in a new iPhone. A sexy lady is smoking jetons by the window, and her sexy boyfriend lights a Marlboro. I scramble across the news updates on an internet that barely functions, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And the cafe owner's daughter leans on a car outside, smoothing her curly hair. Emails start flying around among the journalists. Can you get to the street by car? The phones are not working. A photo, it looks small. No injuries. Then another photo, lots of damage. 1 dead. You gotta use BlackBerry Messenger to get through. It's 2 dead. 2? Only 2. No, 12 wounded. Security sources are confirming definitely more dead. More than 100 wounded. A giant crater. In the rush of information, time slows down, and I take in the event as if I am watching a drama on TV. But this action is taking place just 3 miles from where I am sitting, in my favorite cafe. The waiter brings me more coffee. A scooter squirts by, roaring up Hamra, making these little burping noises. A man and woman embrace on a couch. That girl I've seen around, she's probably a freshman at the local design school. She's wearing a blue feather in her hair, and there are pink caps on the tips of her little leather Oxfords. She's upset about something, not the bomb. She's taking a seat, scribbling in a notebook, and she is holding back tears. I make the mistake of looking at some grisly photos from the bomb site. I still have not heard from my friend Mike. Cars are mangled, and several firefighters stand in the smoking wreck that was once someone's apartment. The death toll is now 8 in some reports, 3 in others. In one shot, a woman covered in blood is fainting, and in another photo, I see what looks like the brains of a 10-year-old girl. An alert pops up on my phone, a reminder that Loretta's swim lesson is tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. Excuse me. I sometimes cry, I'm sorry. If my life were a TV show, this might be the moment I have some kind of epiphany. Instead, heading home from the cafe, I stop for wine and a handle of whiskey, and I pass a young boy with 30 fingernails flipping through a gun catalog. Tofu is back in stock at the health store, and the phones are working again. Mike calls. I just wanted to let you know we're okay, he says. There's an American tourist in Wrangler jeans looking up, guidebook in her hand, and I get a good look at her long white throat. A man in front of his clothing boutique is arguing about the cut of a shelf in his remodeled front window. Back at home, trying to remain calm, Kelly and I invite our friend Richard and his daughter to come by. His wife is on assignment in Libya, and we don't want to be alone. I offer to stir up a round of Manhattans. Richard, who is from Wales, says he's never had one. I mix and we stare at our phones, seeking information about our new lives. And as it comes, our little girls run around, cutting things with scissors. Turns out, one of the country's top intelligence chiefs is among the dead. We brace ourselves for the additional darkness that is sure to come, and into each drink I carefully spoon a bright red cherry. Now I hand Richard his Manhattan, and he says he feels like a character in Mad Men. I feel the sting of the Hollywood comparison. He takes a sip. I wait for his reaction. You Americans like everything so sweet, he says. Later, I walk outside toward Hammer Street. I'm an American in Beirut, heading to an ATM for some extra money, just to be on the safe side. My life? It's not a TV show. The streets are eerily quiet. If someone in Hollywood had written this, my character would do something brave, or something stupid, or maybe he'd be killed. But in the faint light of a street lamp, what I see is a family of 3 walking toward me, and they're all licking ice cream cones. Thank you. So I'd be happy to take questions. I mean, I can talk about anything you want. If you have any specific writing questions, Two of my former English teachers are in the audience. Miss Simmons and Miss Salahuddin. Huge honor to have them here. Yes, sir. What can I do for you?
Well, you haven't changed my mind at all that they don't like us over there. And, my question to you is, why are you crazy enough to want to do this with a wife and a child?
Okay, that's a completely fair question. I mean, one thing I try and say when people kind of take that line of, it's completely fair to question my instincts, but in terms of them and us, like trying to draw broad conclusions about how people elsewhere feel about us is a little like sort of pointing at the South during the 60s and assuming everyone down there was burning crosses. I mean, the sort of extreme element in these countries is small. Like in Saudi Arabia, most of the time I would encounter people who were thrilled to meet me. You know, I mean, my mom visited. We were, you know, the ethic of being a good host and being kind and friendly is very strong there. So, I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know everything, but from my travels, I would counter that it's not necessarily true that they don't like us. There are elements that don't, for sure, but there are huge swaths of people who are nice and normal. As to the decision to be there, I think there's a reason that a lot of news organizations sort of cap the number of years you spend somewhere, because I think you go there with principles and goals, and at a certain point, the reality of the number of dangers the risks you're taking, start to erode your principles, and you run out of steam, and you can't force yourself to be there anymore. And I think I ran out of steam sooner than my wife did. Like, we left this summer, and she is still filled with some regret. I mean, she misses the exhilaration of, you know, writing the first draft of history. I mean, these are important things that are happening, and we need to know. So someone's got to do it. I'm just really grateful that it's not me right now for a little while. I can't guarantee we're not going back out. Sorry, Mom. Ma'am, you had your hand up?
Is this a collection of articles you wrote for different magazines?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first put the manuscript together, it was all pieces I'd written over the 5 years. And I thought, oh yeah, essay collection, no problem. Fortunately, I had a really tough editor who really had me cut a lot of them and rewrite the ones that were left significantly. And then I wrote a handful of brand new ones for the book. And you know, I had a piece come out in the New York Times Magazine a little while ago, a companion piece to the book, and they're like, Nathan Deuel is the author of the memoir, Friday Was the Bone. I'm like, I thought it was a collection of essays. If the New York Times says it's a memoir, sure, it's a memoir. I think, you know, I think they definitely were written as, there's DNA in them that is still these individual pieces that we're writing as things were happening to me. But I think some people smarter than I have read it and said, yeah, this is a narrative now. This is a memoir. So you'll have to read it and tell me. A couple in the back. Yeah, ma'am.
When an incident like that happens in a place that you've been to before, did you feel yourself compelled to go back and see it destroyed, or has it been rebuilt? I mean, do you feel compelled to go back and see it again?
Well, I mean, you know, of course, yeah. I mean, Loretta's, our daughter is going to be 5 in a month, and for the rest of her life, her passport says birthplace Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and that is a sort of a gift and a curse that we've given her for the rest of her life. She's going to have to. I mean, maybe she'll be the kind of person who doesn't think about where they were born, but I think most of us do think. You know, they want to know where it was that they came into the world. So I fantasize for sure about, you know, when she's old enough to take her back there and have her meet some of the people. You know, we've got a little sort of beautiful little locket that a good friend gave us. You know, Saudis would that's why it was so special to be there, because we weren't oil executives. We weren't, you know, training their navy. Our job was just to go out and meet people. And especially once Kelly was pregnant and we had the child, people would really let us into their homes. And I really treasure that place. I've never experienced this sort of the crush, the pleasant crush and warmth of that culture's emphasis on family and hospitality. There's nothing like it. I mean, it's once the fearsome doors open and you're let in, whoa, you're family, and it's special. Yeah, David.
You know, I want you to read a book called My War Gone By. I Miss It So.
Phenomenal book. Yeah.
Did
Did you ever feel that kind of a tug?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those moments when I sort of wish Kelly was here to give her side of the story. And if some of you regularly listen to public radio, I think they aired it here in Miami. She did an hour-long radio documentary about sort of grappling with being a war correspondent. Because I'm always a little bit, I kind of get a twinge when people call me a journalist. I mean, former editor, current creative writer, Kelly's the journalist. McEvers, yeah. She's going to be hosting All Things Considered on the weekends in July, so that's a fun time to hear. I know, wasn't that nice? Yeah. we have Sammy Mack here to thank. Yeah, so in that piece, David, she really agonized over this stuff, and I'll just take a little minute to describe the story. So Kelly realized that she kind of had a problem, that she was addicted to danger, and so she started recording herself. Like I'm on the back of a truck. I'm crossing into Syria. All the guys around me are slamming Red Bulls. They have headscarves on their faces. They're carrying AK-47s. There's a 50-millimeter cannon bolted to the top of this pickup. There are explosions ahead. I can see them. We're going towards them. And I love it, So this is kind of how her hour-long piece starts. I mean, she ended up kind of trying to understand herself. And she interviewed a lot of kind of current war correspondents and former war correspondents, and perhaps most painfully, the children of deceased war correspondents. And she also talked to scientists. And not many scientists have done rigorous studies of the foreign correspondent mind. But this one guy did. And he found twin sisters, one a soccer mom, the other a legendary correspondent, and looked at their dopamine levels. And the war correspondent lady was like off the charts. And so her body literally was sort of allowed her to thrive in these situations. And one of the things that happened to me is after my dad died and I became the sole caretaker of this child, a lot of people who know me for a long time know me as kind of crazy Nate. Like I would do anything. And I really kind of lost that. I'm a scaredy cat now in many ways. And Kelly just got more and more like fearless. And so she talked to this one woman whose father was shot in the neck in El Salvador in the 80s. And she's like, Kelly, she's British, be honest with yourself. You're not doing this to save the world. You're doing it because it's fun. And you need to quit because you're addicted to it, and the odds are not in your favor. Every time she crossed into Syria, her odds are not in her favor. She might have been blown up. So she's like, Kelly, what you need to do is write a letter to your daughter and your husband and tell them why you're choosing war over them, because that's what you're doing. And so in this piece, which you all should listen to, she writes the letter. She writes a letter to Loretta and I, like, dear Loretta and Nathan, this is why I've chosen war over you, and it's a letter I was supposed to read in the event of her death. We still have that letter. When we have a chance, we're going to go to Venice Beach, where we live now, and we're going to burn that letter, because I don't intend to ever hear that letter. And she reads it on air, and I've heard a version of the story, but she zeroes that. She kills the levels during that, so I've managed to not hear it, and I don't want to hear it. Do we have time still, or? Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm having fun if you guys are. I can just blither on too. Yes, ma'am.
We came in a few minutes late.
Yeah, no problem.
Did you grow up in Miami?
I did. Yeah, we moved here in 1986. So I
was on the school board for 20 years, so I'm very interested in your education in Miami.
Yeah, I did elementary school from 2nd grade to 5th at Coral Reef, and had some wonderful teachers. I don't know if there are any reefers in the building. It was a great place. I spent one very grim year at FC Martin. That was a very unpleasant experience.
My daughter went there in 6th grade as well.
Yeah.
Quite a bit older than you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like Palmetto had been.
Yeah.
But she derived a great deal from the experience.
Perhaps. Yeah, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I suppose. Yeah. There was a phenomenal math teacher we would sort of go. Did anyone go to FC Martin? What was that woman's name? Miss Nickerson or something like that? She was amazing.
Yes.
God, she was a delight. But yeah, my sort of homeroom teacher, Miss Klomparens, God bless her. I don't know if she's still around. She obviously didn't like us, or like even the concept of teaching. And I remember literally giving myself a bloody nose so I could leave the classroom.
Tell them some good stories about the other schools.
Southwood. Oh my God, Southwood was the best. Phenomenal
Yes.
magnet program. And there was a guy named Steve Shirker. I don't know if he's still around. Do you remember Steve Shirker? He took me aside. He's like, Nathan, you're not a very good artist. But you could pretend, because you need to go to a little school called Dash. And
I was there yesterday.
yeah, and so McKinley, at Dash, he was very, very kind to me. He's like, you can't draw so well, but you're a really nice guy. And so, yeah, Dash. Spent 10th grade through senior year at Dash, and a couple of my teachers are here, and a lot of my friends. And I gave the keynote speech. I mean, I spoke from the heart when I said that I don't know if this has come through in the talk at all, but I've done a lot of weird, made a lot of strange choices in my life. Walking to New Orleans, quitting jobs that otherwise normal people would keep for life, dropping out of colleges that you might want to go to. And I think it all kind of, I can trace it to Dash and just the idea that it showed, in ways that are good. I'm getting to it, I promise. Just, it was a place that sort of told you at a very young age that you can be whoever you want to be. And it gave you the tools the tools and the training to not to think about like making money or whatever other people tell you should be, to be yourself and to pursue sort of the best things we can do as people together, which often is art, and making sort of inessential things and sort of taking the time to study this strange and hilarious thing we call life and try and make more meaning out of it. Does that make any sense? Yeah.
It makes me feel wonderful. I was one of the people responsible. It was a fight to get that.
Well, God bless you.
Administrators who wanted to make it a trade school.
Oh, no. Terrible. Yeah.
So, well, you have to get in there and fight.
Yeah.
Let the school board members know what you think.
Yeah, to just be told at 15, like, yeah, there aren't many rules. Just, here's some, let's look at art today and talk about it. It was an amazing education, and unusual, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, you are unusual.
Yeah, thanks. I suppose I'll take that as a compliment. Yeah.
It is.
You make Dash actually seem like it was like a complete cakewalk, but throughout every other high school, we were held at an academic standard above everyone else. I swear to you. Like, I was number 5, and I had a 4.3 GPA. You were number 1, and I don't know how much. But seriously, nobody. It was not like.
But think what you would have
It expanded
done
us for
in
sure.
an ordinary school. You wouldn't have reached those.
We all love Dash. Does anyone have any other questions? Yes, sir.
I wasn't going to ask you, but you brought it up again.
Sure.
What made you walk to New Orleans? Like, because that's a pretty random decision.
Yeah, so the system of rewards that keeps you at a place like Rolling Stone involve money and like sort of this idea of glamour, I suppose. And I quickly was becoming someone that I think friends didn't recognize. A guy who's sadly not here, but his dad and I think his sister are here. Tiago Bueno, one of my dearest friends. He took me on a long walk that spring and just said, "We don't even recognize you, man. Who have you become?" Because I was always talking about like my position on the masthead and how many stories I had assigned in the magazine that month, and like trying to get jobs at other magazines, and it was like a game, and the game was sort of Manhattan media. It sort of rewards sort of this cutthroat killer instinct that sadly I sort of took to and really enjoyed, but it made me kind of a monster. And so when I kind of had this moment of awakening, that like, oh my gosh, and the reason it happened is that a colleague had quit, and it was at the moment it astonished me. I'm like, oh my God, you mean you don't want to get a better job? You're just quitting to just be yourself for a little while? That it sort of snapped me out of this like trance I'd been put in, this sort of career track idea. And during that brief moment of awakening, it occurred to me that if I just spent a lot of time by myself out in America, asking myself and people I encountered, like, what matters, that on the other end, perhaps I would emerge better. So yeah, and I love the walk. I love the outdoors, and one of the things about New York is that it's covered in concrete, and so I was really exhilarated by the idea of just walking every day. I'd walk 30 miles a day, And at night, I would just throw up my tent on the beach behind a church. One of my favorite things to do is, like Dolphin Estates, the sign for like a housing development. You can picture that sign. It would have foliage behind it. I'd sleep right there. And so I know that sounds slightly nuts, and it was. But part of the thrill was just kind of showing, in New York, like I'd bought an apartment and I was all obsessed with my business card, and I envied sort of people who are wealthier and more successful than me, and that envy had curdled in me. And so to be on the road and to kind of show that you could, with no money whatsoever, you could sort of use and appreciate these sort of unloved parts of our great country. I'm a very patriotic person. I love America. One of the most beautiful times I had on the whole walk was, I'll ask you to imagine another thing in your mind. So highway, road running underneath it, on-ramp. That sort of triangle of land described by road, highway, and on-ramp. Imagine it, a stand of trees and some bushes. I'd sleep right there, and I'd wake up to the soft steps of a deer and the flutters of a butterfly and a leaf with a bit of morning dew on it, and that would blow my mind. And those are little things I try and keep with me all of the time. Yes, ma'am. I had a little digital recorder I would talk into like a crazy person the whole time. So I have reams of observations that maybe one day will become a book. We'll see. I think it's taken me a long time to really be able to kind of go through and articulate how the story of that walk in a way that's universally meaningful. It's always been very meaningful to me, but turning something that idiosyncratic and that granular, because we're talking 2,000 miles, we're talking 30 miles a day. I saw this avalanche of input, but teasing out the story is quite another thing. It's one thing to do interesting things, ladies and gentlemen, and I encourage you to do them. But learning how to turn them into a story takes. Some people are lucky. Some people come out of the gates as storytellers. There's a great oral tradition, and perhaps I'm abusing it this evening. But yeah, learning how to write well is taking me a long time, and that's assuming that this is any good, which is unclear, I suppose. But yeah, writing's great. You should all try it if you don't already. Maybe I'm in a room full of amazing writers. Okay, one more. Thank you for the hook. One more. Anybody?
Have you been to Iran lately?
Gosh, I wish. No, that's a really tough country to get into. We've been applying for visas off and on since I think 2003, and for whatever reason they don't like us. So if we could sneak in the same way that Saudi Arabia allowed us to live there, I would move there tomorrow. That would be amazing. Sorry, Mom. Yeah, so I think that was great. Thanks so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Nathan. That was wonderful. I'd just like to say, I don't know how anybody there could hate any of us here when you're there representing us. So thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate that.
You don't know me that well.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for coming. As I say, the books are for sale behind the counter. Nate will sit there right here and sign them for you. If you're watching from online, give us a call. We'll get one signed. We'll ship it to you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.